Welcome to the Kings Beat podcast. I am James Ham, your Kings insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat. Joining me, Mr. Brenden Nunes from the Kings Herald and the Kings Pulse podcast. Brenden, what's going on?
Not too much, James. Another day in the life. I'm going to be pretty careful with my wording today, I will say.
Oh, Brenden learned the hard way. Oh, Brenden, I did not mean to call you out. I felt bad afterwards.
It was
so
hilarious.
Hang on, it's too hot in here. So hang on, I gotta
God.
take my sweatshirt off.
Anybody not watching on YouTube
Look at this.
needs to be watching on YouTube.
Excuse me.
Takes off Kings Beat merch to reveal more Kings Beat merch.
The Kings Beat merch to reveal the more Kings Beat merch. And then we got a special thing going on today. We're going to see how this works. Give me 2 seconds, Brenden.
Who is that?
Uh-oh. We've gone to the triple box. Sean Cunningham is back.
Who's this imposter?
Fox 40, Sean Cunningham.
Will you be able to get that each time?
Will I be able to get what?
The Fox 40 part, because, the ABC 10 part was a struggle.
Fox 40, yeah. Because Fox 40 doesn't change all the time.
Right.
They stick to something. They have an idea and they stick to it, and I don't have to learn something new every time to get stuck in my head.
That's right. What's up, boys?
Sean Cunningham has rejoined the show, and this is exciting. It's an exciting day. It's been an exciting week for Sean. He's been a media superstar throughout the week. I was wondering when Paris Hilton was going to come in and try to save you. But Eric Armstead, of course, announced was that Tuesday, that Sean Cunningham has moved to Fox 40 and joined a very talented young team. Sean, we're going to give you the floor for a minute. What's going on? Are you back?
I think I'm back, and to just address all the internet rumors, they were absolutely true. James and I had a huge falling out, and we decided that we just couldn't put our differences aside, even after our faces ended up on T-shirts together. And because of that, and it happened right at the Sabonis trade, and one of us felt so strongly for Tyrese Halliburton, it created this huge fracture. That was another one I saw. And so we hate each other, and then we just kind of made amends after. All it took was Kings basketball ending, and we finally went. Let's just meet and let's talk this out. Let's hash this out. Let's become friends again. We've known each other too long, James. We had to move on and get better, right?
That's
I'm here
right.
to moderate and keep the peace.
That's right. Well, that, and I just started cheating on you with a much younger man.
And I can accept that. Look, I felt like we were in an open relationship. It's fine, no big deal. But that's all bullshit. No, I had a thing at my previous employer, and the reality is this podcast, unbeknownst to me, and kind of by total surprise to me, did very well very quickly. And I probably took a little bit of that for granted, but I had always had my ducks in a line, thinking that I was good to do this because I was allowed to do so many appearances and radio stuff, and it's just part of my job. And for people who don't know, I mean, pandemic had kind of hit it a little bit, but I also keep a role with Kings Radio, and so that was another thing I did. And but this one all of a sudden felt different because, I don't know if people know this, but the company that owns Channel 10 owns a competing podcast, and it's a good one. I mean, they've got a huge network, and there's I don't mind saying it. It's James might kill me here in a minute, but it's the Locked On podcast, and obviously there's a Kings one as well. So there's one for every team and every sport and every city, and they deemed it a competing one, and they had to do a lot of investigation in terms of whether or not I could do it. And at the end of the day, they decided I probably shouldn't. So we were talking things through. It took a hiatus and weren't able to really kind of do it at the moment. And I understood, and it kind of sucked. And I'm glad Brenden was able to kind of save the day and kind of make this into something even take it into another level. So yeah, now and now that I'm kind of moving on, my new employer at Fox 40 sees a huge benefit to it, and obviously there's no competing. They don't have their own podcast network, so I think that helps. So nothing ill will against ABC 10, where I spent so many times and had so many great memories. And it wasn't because of I couldn't come on the podcast while I jumped over to Channel 40, by the way, but it was a nice little carrot there that I was able to still do that. But yeah, it's I got poached, James, Brenden. I got poached. I didn't have to leave 10. I didn't think I'd ever leave. Well, I thought I'd eventually leave 10, but I've been there going into my 12th year, and um, I never worked under a contract, so I was always free to go. So it would have been a thing where it had to be the right situation. And I've talked to every station in town at various points of my career, because it's always good to feel wanted and know what your value is. And like anything, you get to a certain point with whether or not the freedoms that I have at my current place, um, of how to operate and do the job. And then you get into the compensation part, and that's sometimes can be a little tricky to navigate, and you have to get in negotiations. But it's not always about the compensation. It's about the workplace and the happiness and the ability to do your job, and so many factors. And I hadn't had to change jobs, and I came from KHDK to ABC 10 in 2010. Now I got fired at KHDK because we had a new program director take over, and they got rid of a show, and I was a dead man walking there for a couple months. So I would have fired me, as I always say, because I had no role there. They weren't going to continue to do sports in the way that we were doing it. So when I went to Channel 10, they swooped me up. That was my home. That was my TV home. Learned everything there, and Brian and Ryan were so great. And here I am 12 years later, and then literally because of the legend Jim Crandall leaving, I was always jealous that Jim Crandall, who's so amazing, and that channel Fox 40 is able to do so much sports, not just on TV, but for people who don't know, I've told this to James, and I think I've even mentioned to you, Brenden, like their appetite for sports within their newscast is unmatched. It's no slight on Channel 10 or any other TV station in the market, but when you're talking about having 3 minutes of content at minimum at 6 o'clock, and then 4.5 minutes Monday through Friday, and then, oh, by the way, that's for your 10 o'clock. And they just added an 11 o'clock newscast, which is, even more news now we have to fill. And then on Fridays and Saturdays, year round, you have a 15-minute sportscast for a Sacramento TV station. And I was always kind of jealous of that, because you have all this time to show great sports and add context and depth and great interviews and expertise and have guests and do all these freedoms that you can do. And that was always something that I looked at and said, man, that's a really good opportunity. I'm kind of jealous of that. I'd love to have that. And just their appetite for it. And then when they found out that I was available, and they went to, Mark Dembski had left, and Jim Crandall had retired, and they ended up bringing in two great people. Chris Tavares, a guy who's worked 10 years in Austin, and now he's over at Fox 40, and he came after me hard. And then Lindsay Polaris, who is, from Green Bay, from Southern California initially, and they don't have someone like me where they needed someone who kind of knew the market. So I think by virtue of me just being old AF and being available, boy, yeah, man, they made it a hard decision, and I couldn't turn it down. So that's just a long-winded way of saying I really, really love ABC 10. I appreciate ABC 10. It's my home, but I have a new home now. And to quote the great Christina Mendonza when she left, I said this on air on last Sunday. I said, I'm not done telling stories and covering sports. I'm just done telling them there. And I'm going to some place where they've not only made me feel wanted, but like insane. Like it is cringeworthy. I am like the self-deprecation where it's like, I feel like Groucho Marx, because like he famously said, like, any club that would have me, I want no part of. And, maybe I should run for mayor one day and totally, maybe I could do it, because there's just so much support that I've seen, especially on social media, where there's no place in social media for compliments and good vibes. It's all a barren wasteland of dreck and toxicity. So, I love being back here, though. I love being at Fox 40 and to have the opportunity. And I start on Monday, so right now I'm kind of like the unemployed Sean Cunningham. We're in the transition, Sean Cunningham.
All right. Sean's going to go for mayor. He's going to do a heat check.
Right?
Yeah, that'd be a full-fledged career heat check. Yeah, I'm super excited to have you back. The depth of storytelling that we were able to do when we first opened this podcast up, I think it's what drew a lot of people to the pod. It's what's helped it grow so fast. And then, again, when you had to step aside, it was actually out of like nowhere. It was like, hey, I can't do the pod anymore. And I'm like, oh, wait, what? We got like a pod like tomorrow. And that's where Brenden stepped in. And Brenden has just been, again, like we talk about this all the time on the pod, Sean. I don't know if you listen, but a lot of the business of basketball is watching and getting the fresh look from Brenden of things that we went through, a decade or more, 2 decades ago. When you're fresh in the business and you're seeing things for the first time. And I think it's added a really cool perspective. And so we're going to do this a weird way where sometimes there will be 2 of us, sometimes there will be 3 of us. There's always going to be at least 2 of us on the show. Sometimes there will be a guest. And we're just going to play it by ear and see how it all works out. Because to be honest, Brenden has been a breath of fresh air, and I love having Sean back. The chemistry that we have is just spectacular. And so, we're gonna run this thing out. We're gonna talk Kings basketball and give you some incredible content here. It's just gonna be a little bit different because there's 3 of us, and to me, that's spectacular. It's another voice in the room, and a very, very, very qualified voice. Who deserves all of the praise that he's been getting on social media, even if he is self-deprecating. Sean is absolutely one of the best in the business. And in Sacramento, on the TV side and the production side, there's absolutely no one better. And that's why Fox 40 went out and got him, because he is a true, like, 5-tool player behind the scenes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Group hug.
And
checks in the mail, James.
Oh,
look at that.
Oh, yeah. We got our T-shirt on.
I think I look a lot thinner on that T-shirt.
Yeah.
I like it.
I feel a little like Will Hardy here. I'm like the young guy surrounded by so many great people to learn from in San Antonio. Like, the young one with 2 Sacramento media legends. I'm extremely lucky here.
There we go.
Legend.
All right, so let's hit this. We got a couple things to cover. Number 1, if you're watching on YouTube, go down and give us a thumbs up and a subscription. Also, you can leave comments. We've been getting a ton of comments, and some of them crack me up, especially when Brenden says completely inappropriate things inadvertently.
Deep dive? Diving deep? I'm not
sure.
I think I caught it.
I don't really remember.
It was a blur.
Yeah. I think
Brenden went viral for the
I can't remember. Yeah.
for the right reason.
I know the exact timestamp because it got linked enough in that comments. So
it did get linked enough in the comment. And shout out to, I think it was Sean, who a different Sean, who put it on the on Twitter, just the audio clip. Okay, so that brings us to tonight. Tonight is Off the Record with the Kings Beat Virtual Happy Hour Part 5, The Return, starring Sean Cunningham, who is taking his talents to Fox 40, but also to the Kings Beat, back to the Kings Beat. And so if you're a premium subscriber to the Kings Beat, you will get a Zoom happy hour link here as soon as the pod is over. And we'll make sure that we have all kinds of good questions. I've got a ton of stuff already. And we're going to maybe dive a little bit deeper into the story of Sean leaving News 10. But we're also going to dive deep into things like the coaching search, things like what's happened here at the end of the season and all of the changes. We'll get into a whole bunch of stuff. So that's tonight, Thursday, April 28th from 5:30 to 7:30. I will be drinking. I think I'm going to go old fashioned tonight. But I for sure will be drinking. It's been one of those weeks. Okay, outside of that, we do still have the Kings Beat merchandise shop coupon code, which is KBPOD, KB Pod. That is also down in the description. And we're going to run the survey for maybe a couple more days, but, I'll probably run it until tomorrow. So if you have time to give us some feedback on the survey, that would be great. We actually have so many questions and so many things that we can touch base on, both in the happy hour and on the podcast that people made comments during the survey. So all of that is awesome. On Tuesday, we handled the inexperienced coaches. Again, Will Hardy, Darvin Ham, and Charles Lee. And we went pretty deep. And like Brenden and I strung that thing along for what seemed like, it was almost 2 hours, where he made inappropriate comments and has been scolded via social media.
I am all for it. Please bring more inappropriate comments and comedy.
I'm just trying to scare away a certain candidate.
Hey, that could be effective, my man. So can I just say, mama, there goes that man right there? There you go.
That's awesome.
With all due respect.
With all due respect. Okay, so actually, let's just start there. We're going to dive into the coaching candidates, and I'm actually, after we get done with the intros and stuff here, I'm actually going to hand it over to Mr. Brenden Nunes. He's going to give us a rundown on the four guys. We'll start with Mark Jackson, but we've got Steve Clifford, we've got Mike D'Antoni, and we've got Mike Brown, who are round out the 7-man coaching search, along with Will Hardy and Darvin Ham and Charles Lee. Brenden, take it away. Let's start with Mark Jackson, and why should Mark Jackson be the Sacramento Kings head coach?
Well, I'll hold off on that second part there, the question. But Mark Jackson,
there should be like music. There should be like music right here as Brenden goes, here's why Mark Jackson should be the Sacramento Kings head coach. And he has to read it even if he doesn't believe it. Like there should be like this stinger in music. Production value, fellas.
Yeah.
6 foot tall.
James wrote a whole script right here that I'm reading word for word.
Sorry, buddy. Go ahead.
You're good. Mark Jackson, 17 years as a player. And after his playing career, he did get a chance, as everybody knows, with the Golden State Warriors in 2011. And in the 17 years prior to Jackson getting a job, the Warriors only made the playoffs one time, which, can relate to what's going on in Sacramento here. And then Jackson, in his first season, they go 23-43. Second year, they jump up to 47-35. In that first year that Mark Jackson took over, it was Steph Curry's third season. Klay Thompson was a rookie, and in that next year when Golden State does make the jump and sees the postseason was the first year of Harrison Barnes and Draymond Green, also the same year that Monte Ellis was traded for Andrew Bogut. And also the year after, you see Andre Iguodala, because they Golden State Warriors in that first round when Jackson made the playoffs, beat the Denver Nuggets. Andre Iguodala then ends up going to the Golden State Warriors, a little bit of a controversial move there. But you really saw the Warriors kind of reach relevance for the first time in over a decade and a half. And a lot of that had to do with it being a very talented roster, but where Mark Jackson excelled was on the defensive end. In that 2012-2013 season where they go 47-35 and lose in the second round, offensive rating of 11th, defensive rating of 14th. Then Andre Iguodala gets added, and in 13-14 you see a record of 51-31. They do end up losing in the first round of the postseason, but it's an offensive rating of 12th and a defensive rating of 4th. Lots of controversy behind the scenes with Mark Jackson, and plenty of stories that some confirmed, some not. The owner comes out and says that there's nobody in the organization liked Mark Jackson, 200 people, and has to explain that there are 200 people in the organization while he's saying this. And Steve Kerr comes in, and as impressive 51-31 it is for Mark Jackson to have that record, considering the incompetence and irrelevance that had taken place with the Golden State franchise prior to him taking over. The first year that Steve Kerr comes in, jumps up to 67-15 from that 51-31 with some major changes. What am I missing with Mark Jackson here, guys? Because, there's a lot of behind-the-scenes talks and everything, but there's only so much to look at in this 3-year tenure.
Well, the one thing that just hops off the page for me, and I can localize it to the Kings, is famously, if you remember when Vivek Ranadive chose Michael Malone to come into Sacramento as his first head coach, Michael was credited with like being in a weird way. I always thought, James, because it really took away from Mark Jackson and what he did. Because like, however the sausage is made and whatever you want to say about the guy on the exit, like I always felt Michael Malone got too much credit for everything Mark Jackson did. Some of it was true, but I also feel like a lot of it was done at the expense of Mark Jackson, if that makes sense. For example, like he was so his departure from the Warriors was so ugly behind the scenes, and people who did not like him, that the entire organization, in a way of not totally burying Mark Jackson on the way out, I think they chose to heap so much praise to Michael Malone, almost making him, unworthy of it. And then here he becomes the Sacramento Kings head coach, and he's credited with all these things that was just a nice glossed up way of praising Michael Malone, so you could, in a sense, say "F you" to Mark Jackson on the way out. That's the first thing that comes to mind there. And aside from all the other stories, back channels, whether you've got players on or off record who liked him and then did not like him, did not respect him, it was a walking double standard, and then of course, it's no secret that the Bible influence in the locker room was big. A lot of players like it, some don't. So it's never a look. All coaches have egos. All coaches have a lot of people that don't like them. They're very strange people at the end of the day. And I think his successes were well documented. I think his failures were. I do think he deserves another coaching chance eventually. I think to do that, you might see him as an assistant one day, but when you've got the best gig, which is essentially the John Gruden role in broadcasting that the NFL has, only he's got it on the NBA side, how do you step away for that to become an assistant coach just so you can go back and be a head coach? I don't see it. So I don't see him being an NBA head coach again, unless there are some people that want to take a chance and look beyond a lot of stuff. And maybe you just get further and further down the road. Maybe it happens this time. I don't think it's Sacramento, but those are just some things that come to mind when I think of Mark Jackson.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought up the Michael Malone situation. So Michael Malone, if I'm not mistaken, he joined the Kings before Mark Jackson's final year, right? So he was with Mark Jackson for 2 years, and then Mark Jackson coached one more year after, with Malone joining the Kings, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I'm off there. They did jump from 27th in defense to 14th to 4th in the 3 years that Mark Jackson was head coach. It's hard to get away from the fact that Michael Malone is Brenden Malone's son, and that he was known as probably the best lead assistant in the NBA when he became the Kings head coach. And so it's not like he was some fly-by-night guy that stepped in there and did some amazing things. So I think you're going to have some sort of weird dynamic here where, again, Michael Malone and Mark Jackson are probably like diametrically opposed in a lot of things. But you have one guy who is sort of the rah-rah guy, the emotional or religious leader, and the other one is a really strong leader of men, but he's also really, really strong with the X's and O's coming into that job. Again, he had been known for a long time. When Michael Malone got the Kings job, it was nothing but this is the guy that led the Warriors. It was not. So, like, Sean and I heard that a ton here in Sacramento. It was nothing but, like, Michael Malone is the guy. It was not Mark Jackson. We got the actual coach of the Golden State Warriors. So, I think you're right. It did bury Mark Jackson a little bit. And, I think at the end of the day, he doesn't work for Sacramento for a couple of reasons. Number one, he hasn't gone back into coaching since he left the Warriors in, 2014, right? So he hasn't been an assistant. He wasn't an assistant before. So if you want to be a head coach in the league and you get a cup of coffee and you do reasonably well, you would expect that he would get another job right afterwards. But he didn't. And not only that, but he's never taken another assistant role. So when we get to Mike Brown, we'll talk about the fact that for the last 6 years, he's been on Steve Kerr's staff, learning, getting better, becoming a smarter, more balanced head coach. So when he does get another shot, he's going to be better prepared to take that job. Well, Mark Jackson didn't do that. And we can also, just experience-wise, just Will Hardy has 4 times the amount of experience as a basketball coach than Mark Jackson does. 4 times. And he's 34 years old. And so for me, that's one of the biggest things. Of this list of 7 guys, Mark Jackson is the only dude with 3 years. He was 3 years as a head coach, but 3 years of NBA coaching experience. We can say he was a player. We can all these other things, but at the same time, Mike D'Antoni was a player, and Darvin Ham was a player. They were also players. Were they to the level of a guy like Mark Jackson? No. But sometimes you got to do the work. And if you want to be a coach, you got to actually be a coach. You got to do the work. And with Mark Jackson, if we just take away all of the extra stuff with him, then I'm still not comfortable with him. But then we heap on all this other stuff. And I think it's funny when you, we watched a clip, Brenden sent over a clip with Shannon Sharp where Mark Jackson sat down and he asked him specifically, why haven't you been a coach? And there's a bunch of talk about, Mark says, bring anyone in here and you tell me, I'll defend myself, whatever, about all the things that happened. These are reports that weren't it's not like someone made up a list of all the transgressions of Mark Jackson. They made up a list, but they used sourced, well-written things by journalists who are trusted. It's not like these stories were refuted at the time. I mean, Mark Jackson is a guy who literally would fly down to LA to do, his church. He would go preach at his church on Sundays. And at the same time had to come out and apologize for embarrassing the franchise for having an extramarital affair and getting caught in some big, weird scheme behind the scenes. I mean, this is something that it's not just that. It's there are multiple things that led to this. There was also his stance on the LGBTQ community. His opinion on so many things are out there, and a lot of them are based on his religion, but he still decides to put his opinion out there on things. And a lot of his stuff is hypocritical. And to be honest with you, if he were the head coach of the Sacramento Kings, I would find that hire hypocritical by the Sacramento Kings, because that's not what they preach. The inclusiveness is not what they preach on a day in and day out basis. And Mark Jackson, unfortunately, his opinion on all these things are known, and they're counter to the culture that the Kings have purported to hold as their beliefs. Am I off?
No.
Good.
I mean, no, definitely not. It's hard to say that you are. To your point, Iguodala said when asked on the radio, what's up with Mark Jackson not getting another opportunity, and he says, it's the politics of it, the difference in opinions on gender, marriage, and what the Bible says on sexuality, and that the Golden State Warriors head of business was gay, and that there's issues there. And yeah, I mean, there's so much with Mark Jackson. I guess my question would be since the Kings do have plenty of people on their staff, whether it be Vivek Ranadive or Harrison Barnes or anybody else that has direct knowledge of Golden State's, of what happened when Mark Jackson was at Golden State. As my dog goes crazy with this toy, I swear she only squeaks this toy when I'm recording. And she never sits in the view of camera until it's on recording. My question would be, is that since there are people that, in my mind, would have good knowledge of what happened during Mark Jackson's tenure at Golden State, if they made the hire, do you have to have a question of, okay, they know that the extent of what is and isn't true, and they were still willing to make that hire, if I'm making sense here?
Well, I would say this, regardless of that, okay? just take it down to the coaching level and relating to players, because there's a lot of players that feel the same way Mark Jackson does. They don't speak out on it, and right, wrong, indifferent, however you feel. Like, again, I still feel that the tough part for Mark Jackson is, as James mentioned, he doesn't have the experience of Will Hardy, Mike Brown, Terry Stotts, something like that, right? Okay, that's fine. Put that over there. But he does have the ability to be a former player who was a damn good one, an exceptional player. And when you're somebody like Will Hardy, Eric Spoelstra, that's the type of thing that automatically at the door of the locker room, that's a huge hurdle you have to get over with players to earn respect. And to combat that, that's where you need all that experience. Mark Jackson, with all due respect, and I know what James is saying, he doesn't need that type of thing because of what he brings to the table as a former player. But even though it was his first head coaching role, and I do think you're not defined by your first head coaching role. And look, we're a forgiving society and XYZ. I mean, I like to believe that. I think that, again, further you get away from it, maybe you grow. Maybe you still have biases, but maybe you are a little bit more accepting. Look, Mark Jackson knows that, and I'm not a religious person myself, but Mark Jackson knows that most Bibles teach the hate the sin, love the sinner, right? So you still are going to be loving of people around you, even if you disagree with their way of life or their lifestyle. So to that point, hopefully you hope he's grown from there. But the problem is, if you, as a former player who already has the respect of your players that you would be coaching because of what you bring to the table, the minute you lose your credibility or the what you have that gets people to buy into you, and you look like you're a double standard, and I'll use something, this is a very small comparison. It's nowhere near the same thing as we're talking about with some pretty serious issues with Mark Jackson and some pretty controversial topics. But look at Reggie Theus, to bring it back to the Kings, right? When Reggie Theus was a head coach of the Kings, he made some rules around the team. One of them was no cell phones practice, things like that. But Reggie, a do as I say, not as I do type coach, had his cell phone glued to his pocket at all times. So that irked players a lot. Maybe not so many of the veteran players, but certainly some of the younger ones, because a younger player is more, apt to kind of call out some BS when he sees it, where it's like, but you're not doing this. Like, you should hold yourself accountable too. And all that, end of the day, if nobody buys into what you're selling and you lose the room, you lose the team, right? Even if you have half the locker room, maybe you have half the locker room on your side, but then that is what is known, and that's what gets spread everywhere throughout the league. You have a players union. These coaches are for definitely a fraternity. Mark Jackson can coach. So again, at the end of the day, if you're willing to look beyond some of these things, hope that this guy has shown some ability to grow from some of these things, then if you're all in, I'll go for it. But I do think there's enough reservation in my mind to think that I think I can probably find a better coach, and one that doesn't bring some of these things that could be deemed as a distraction. It's probably not the right time if you're the Sacramento Kings to be bringing in Mark Jackson.
Yeah, and I'll ask you this, Sean. Sean, do you think he's grown? Like, I watched that video. I don't know, like, because I watched the video with Shannon Sharp, which I don't know, was that like 7 months ago or something?
Yeah.
I didn't see any contrition. I didn't see. I saw. You know what I saw? I saw a pious man. That's what I saw.
Yeah. Well, I will say this. I mean, look, it's a tough question to answer. I think if asked a direct question, you got to respect getting a direct, honest answer. You may not agree with it. Again, like, I'm not gonna stick up for what Mark Jackson said, but let's not pretend Mark Jackson's the only person that feels that way.
No, but what about the Festus Ezeli situation?
Completely agree. I know. Yeah, I get that. And guess what? Harrison Barnes saw that firsthand. So there is a lot of things that happen. But again, are they too tough to get over?
Has he given you enough things that make you want to get over that,
let's
though?
put it this way, guys. Like,
That's a good question.
let's put it this way. Mark Jackson can still go on Shannon Sharp's show, say what he said, honestly, directly, and I think have what I considered it to be a pretty civil conversation about it. Whether you agree or disagree, that's you. But he's still on ABC, ESPN, calling basketball games on the flagship of the NBA. So the NBA and these networks clearly don't think that it was a problem, and respect him to be able to articulate that clearly better than maybe I can. And I didn't think I'd be the guy sticking up for Mark Jackson. I'm not, but I just don't think it's worth the hire, in my opinion. I don't think it's worth where you are as a basketball team. And again, what they should be concerned about is getting better. I still don't, even if he didn't have these things, I don't know that he'd be the right answer for the Sacramento Kings. I don't think he would be the right answer for the Sacramento Kings.
I agree with that. I mean, again, like whether he can coach or not, I just like, what is the upside? Because I mean, I don't think the upside is that he comes to Sacramento with visions of coaching the Knicks down the road and rebuilding his legacy. And then goes on to bigger and better things. Like I'll make this claim. It's the same thing I talked to Deuce and Mo earlier today. If you're the Sacramento Kings, this hire is monumental. Everyone knows that, right? This is like one of those hires that if you mess up, you're screwed, right?
But they've been screwed.
No, I totally agree. But if we factor in like the Sabonis situation and just the way where the franchise is now, 16 years, I mean, this is one of those things. But I think if you're hiring for a Sacramento Kings head coaching job, shouldn't the goal be to bring in somebody that can be the Rick Adelman or that can be just, Eric Spoelstra, or like the goal should be to find the long-term answer, to find the guy that will lead this team for a decade. Does it work out in Sacramento? It hasn't yet since Adelman left, but shouldn't that be like the biggest piece going into a coaching search, is that we have to find someone that can grow the culture, that can build a system, that can put this everything in place and hopefully be here for the next decade. Because I can tell you what we're seeing in Memphis and what we're seeing in Minnesota and what we're seeing in New Orleans is that they already got, not only do they have good players, but they already got the guy who's building the culture, and they hired him and they're growing with that person. The Kings aren't just falling behind as far as talent. They're falling behind as far as like a system and a structure and a culture. And they're so far behind in culture than almost any of these other teams anyways. But that's what this hire should be about. It should be about putting down a foundation that lasts, not putting down a foundation, which, again, we can skip forward to Mike D'Antoni if we want. He'll be 71 in a couple of days. Like, what is the end game there? Because that's not, again, that's a great coach. But this should be about building a culture in a small market that can withstand all of the things that happen to a small market team. That's why you should be looking at Spurs, people. The Spurs are so successful, and Popovich has cranked out one successful coach after another that takes that idea and goes into smaller markets and finds success. And so that's where I would be looking at this. Like, where does Mark Jackson fit into that? Is this a long-term thing?
I think the counter would be that Mark Jackson, again, went to a place that I think was probably saying the same things about their organization at the time when they brought him in. Again, one playoff appearance in 17 years prior to hiring him. And then he was on a team that changed the narrative and changed the culture. And he's credited all the time for instilling the utmost confidence in his players. Draymond and Steph said on Draymond's podcast recently, even if that meant making things up sometimes, which probably points to the Ezeli thing, for example. Or Steph gave a story that the day that they traded Monte, Mark Jackson pulled him aside and said, just so you know, they wanted to trade you. And there's other aspects, but I kind of stuck my neck out for you, so don't let me be wrong.
We were there for that night. That happened in Sacramento. You remember that, Sean?
I do. I remember that, and I remember the boos that Joe Lacob got with when Rick Barry had to chastise the Oracle crowd in Oakland and tell him, "Hey, pipe down." Basically, I mean, he's basically the Warriors fans booed Joe Lacob after the trade of Monte Ellis.
Yeah, I mean, it happened. The trade, Monte Ellis was actually on the court at Arco, and they pulled him off the court, and then Mark Jackson held his pregame. I think, was that preseason when they traded him for Bogut? And he got all emotional, and it was a very awkward situation where, like, I hadn't been in a situation where it was, like, real and raw. It reminded me a little bit of when Rudy Gay got traded. They had a camera crew filming that day and just randomly in Toronto. And when he got traded, all those guys, like, sitting against the wall, like, oh my gosh, this is happening. This is totally bizarre. So we were right there. It was firsthand, like, holy cow, this is bizarre. This is crazy. So anyway.
So I think the argument for Jackson is if you believe that it took him making Steph Curry, Klay Thompson just be as confident as they could be in themselves for them to become that level of player, or did he just happen to walk into a situation where he had Hall of Famers on his roster? And, it's probably a bit of a combination of both, but if the most valuable thing that's talked about in a player, and like he was playing Draymond Green at small forward all the time, and to be fair, Draymond still says nice things about Mark Jackson, thinks he should get another opportunity in the NBA. But to me, if the best skill that's talked about with Mark Jackson is instilling confidence in players, I feel like there's a lot of guys that could fit that mold.
Interesting.
I don't disagree.
I'd even say this. A lot of the players that he was instilling confidence in, they watched him as a player. The guys now that he's going to have to instill confidence in, all they know is he's a dude on TV. They don't know who the hell Mark Jackson is as a player. So I mean,
I don't know Mark Jackson as a player.
No,
I know of Mark Jackson, but never.
But you know what I mean?
Him.
That's different, right? We're talking about a totally different generation of of players. I mean, Mark Jackson's been out of the league, I don't know, what is it, 15, 16 years? Like, it's been a long time. I don't know when the last year he played. And so you're talking about players that, some of them, sure, know who Mark Jackson was as a player, but the Kings don't really have many of those players, so.
And 51 wins sounds amazing considering what Golden State was starting from, but they lost in the first round that year. Steve Kerr comes in, they win 67, first in offensive rating and defensive rating, and win a championship the next year. So.
Well, Domantas Sabonis would sure know who he is because he just left the organization where Mark Jackson flourished there and has his picture all over the wall in that area. So, I guess if you wanted to find a positive there, and you've got the veteran, one of the veteran franchise pieces to your team, I would imagine him being familiar with you would be a good thing. So, and he famously said he'd like to be a part of the search. So can you just imagine just seeing Sabonis like pop on Zoom to do to watch some of these interviews and give feedback? That'd be pretty interesting to see.
And we've mentioned it, like Harrison Barnes is obviously going to be familiar with Mark Jackson, and Harrison Barnes is somebody that is like outwardly proud of his religion as well. Like if Harrison Barnes was okay with hiring Mark Jackson, I'd have to give it a little bit more second thought, but who knows?
Yeah, and Sabonis was 8 when Mark Jackson retired, and I don't even so yeah, he was around the building. Like, there's pictures of him all over the place in Indiana, but I'm just not sure. Again, like, to me, if you're looking at the list, like, I could pare this list down to 4 guys real quick, and
Can I be honest here for a second?
Yeah.
Am I the only one in the room here that of the 7 coaching candidates? Meh. I'm not blown away. I think don't get me wrong. I do see some names on here that have potential to be some pretty damn good coaches. And I do see some guys on here that have been pretty damn good coaches. But, you know, I know this is a first round. This could be your finalists. This could be it. This could be all that they do. There could be more later on. If I was a betting man, I'd probably see this thing probably wrapped up pretty soon.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, it's an okay list. There's some other names I would like to see, but I don't know, kind of would have liked to see some more names in there in the mix.
Like what names?
Well, I mean, for one of them, the one that just leaps off the page to me is Terry Stotts. It's a guy who I've been a big fan of. There's several other assistants. David Vanderpool comes to mind. I would like to have seen them talk to him.
Sam Cassell.
Sam Cassell with a bullet. It's somebody we've talked about a lot. So yeah, James already kind of knows where my head's at there. But I know there's a ton of names out there, and you do your due diligence, and there's people that. But again, I mean, there's a lot. If this is truly a process-driven search, and this is going to be something you don't have to. It's not like you need a coach before the draft. You really don't. It's nice to have, but you need a coach before you get into free agency, before free agency opens up. So to me, there's no harm in seeing what shakes out in these weeks ahead, especially, you look at a team like Utah. And I think, yes, I mean, you are the Sacramento Kings. And if Quinn Snyder became available, I don't think that your organization jumps to the top of, organization that he would maybe pick for him. For example, if he could go to the Lakers, he probably would. But, that's a guy that I absolutely adore in this league. I love Quinn Snyder and think he would be an amazing fit in Sacramento. And, if you've got to pay for the moon for the guy to go get, do it. I think James Borrego, while that name hasn't come up yet and it was very fresh, he's another guy to talk to. And you're talking about so many guys. I mean, you can really look at Popovich, I mean, everything comes from the Popovich tree. And even some of these guys, with Budenholzer, that obviously goes back to Popovich as well. So
of course,
there's I understand it. I understand what they're doing. I also do question, and I've kind of gone back and forth with this, and it obviously depends on the coach. And I know it's the trend. And James, you mentioned some of them. If you just look at just the success rates of coaches lately, especially these younger coaches, that kind of feels like the move. A first-time head coach, young, somebody who's occupied so many aspects of what a front office role could be, be it a video room, a scout, player development assistant, whatever that looks like, G League, D League at that point, college, maybe, whatever. It seems like you get all these people that check a lot of boxes, and it seems to be that's kind of the trend for a lot of things. But then you also have the out of the box, which is Steve Kerr was this way. Steve Kerr went from a player who kind of failed as a general manager in Phoenix and then jumps into a coaching situation out of the broadcast booth. Steve Nash, who spent some time with the Warriors and then was in their front office and then jumps to the head coach right away without ever having, been on a bench. So there's no real blueprint for it, right? We know that, but it does seem that if I'm the Kings, if I take a risk on somebody, not a risk, but if you do take somebody who's a first-time head coach who's checked a lot of the boxes, I'll use Charles Lee as an example, then I would love to see somebody like a Mike D'Antoni and Alvin Gentry, somebody that's a head coach who's been there, done that, knows every single aspect of head coaching. And we mentioned, since we were talking about Mark Jackson, I think the pathway for Mark Jackson back to the league is if you have a very strong associate head coach with him that is capable of, not only vouching for him, but giving him that extra support that he would need to go into a head coaching situation, whether it's in Sacramento or anywhere else. So I want to see that. I want to see something where you have somebody who is absolutely a icon of coaching if you're going with a first-time head coach.
I totally agree with you. I mean, that's why I look like Mike D'Antoni. First of all, I'm going to say that an assistant and a head coach should get to hire his own staff. That doesn't mean that you can't help him hire his own staff. And I talked about this a little bit. I think on the radio the other. Like we have a weird connection here. Monty McNair, Will Hardy, Darvin Ham, and Steve Clifford all have the same agent. And that matters. Like I've talked about this.
I mean, it does, but there's only like a handful.
What? What do you mean?
Like they're like that represent?
No,
coaches.
you're right.
There's only like so many. There's not like players where you've got ample coaching agencies out there.
No, totally. But I think that when you're trying to build a staff, the fact that you do have some ties behind the scenes, ties that bind, I think again, Steve Clifford would be an excellent number two because he's a defensive guru and can help tighten things up and could actually, he's been through it. He's had some moderate success, but actually a lot of failures. When I look at the list itself, the 7 names, I'm not totally disappointed. Would I have liked to have seen Terry Stotts on it? Yeah. But again, I think Terry Stotts could have said no. Kenny Atkinson, we talked about this. The Kings were uncomfortable with something with Kenny Atkinson and decided.
Which, by the way, is a little ironic considering Mark Jackson.
Well, considering Mark Jackson, of course. So, but we don't know what they're uncomfortable about.
But also, Brenden, recency, right? Mark Jackson was a decade ago, it feels like. Well, it was.
Yeah.
Then, so that's why I say with Mark Jackson, the farther you get away from certain things.
Right. No, that's true. But of the list itself, Vanderpool would have been nice. Kenny Atkinson would have been nice. But I think you have a really strong representation of the up-and-coming young coaches. Like, Will Hardy is widely considered one of the best up-and-coming young coaches in the league. I mean, he was Popovich's lead assistant for 2 years. He's Ime Udoka's lead assistant on the Boston Celtics. Like, if you're looking at a guy, Darvin Ham, he's been through it. He's gone through all of the D-League, the assistant, growing through an assistant. He's a lead assistant on a championship team in the Milwaukee Bucks. I think that that list itself is pretty solid. It's just that, I don't know that there's that many head coaches out there, the guys with coaching experience. Again, I said this on the last pod, but Mike Brown is like the guy in the middle that seems like he would be the easiest hire. He's a 52-year-old guy. He's got some high-end coaching experience. Most of his winning seasons came with either LeBron James or Kobe Bryant. But at the same time, he's gone back. He spent 6 years as an assistant under Steve Kerr. And so, like, he's the one guy, to be honest with you, I don't think will take the job.
Yeah, I think he's the most qualified, in my opinion.
Yeah, he probably checks the most boxes.
And I think he'd be the perfect situation for. I'm not saying I would hire him. I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm just looking objectively.
I think that's where I'm at.
And I love Mike Brown. I really do. I think he's a great guy. He's OCD on steroids. And anyone who thought Michael Malone was structured, oh my God! Like you were just talking about Steve Clifford and how like you talk about like Mike Brown is insane. OCD, and that's, to me, it's a good thing. The guy's incredible. But to me, he just leaps off the page as the most qualified, and I could see him being really, really good here. I don't know that I would hire him, but if it all comes down to what you want and the fit, and there's so many. Mike Brown I think he's had a really good track record. I really do. I think people overlook it a lot. So, there's I think if I was to bet right now, I think, James, you're probably, of the 7, you would say Will Hardy.
Darvin Ham. Like it's I want to interview both and see where the chips lay. But
Brenden?
I would, if I have to pick one, I'm going Will Hardy.
And for me, I don't know. To play along, I don't know. I honestly don't. Like, to me, I'm more inclined of seeing the 7, and I'm more inclined to say I want to see these playoffs play out. I want to see what happens to Utah. If there's a chance I can get Quinn Snyder, guess what? He's the one I want the most.
No, I totally agree. And like I've asked very specifically, is the 7 the list? Is that it? And the answer was it
I've been told no.
of the currently available coaches, yes.
Yeah, no,
It's
that's a different question.
yeah.
Is of your
Yes.
and again of your first round of virtual interviews, which really doesn't mean a goddamn thing until you look. We just did this with Mike Bibby. I know some people slammed me for the Mike Bibby thing. If you're talking to someone over Zoom about your head coaching position, that's an interview.
Yes.
Okay, so Mike Bibby had that virtually over the phone, and I made sure to say not in person with Sac State. So right now it doesn't matter until you show up on campus, until you show up in Sacramento and tour and have a sit down interview with Monty McNair and Wes Wilcox and Vivek Ranadive and his son and Matina and whoever else and Usher and
Yes.
whoever else wants to come in the building. Doesn't matter. Maybe 4 of the 500 owners they have still. It doesn't matter.
It's like a party bus.
Right. And you know
We're
what?
here for the interview.
Good for them. And Sabonis is sitting right over there too. Like, good for them. I don't care. Like, that's when it becomes real. Okay. So the whole, like, these are our 7. Yes, they are your 7. And you know what? Your coach is probably in the 7. But I'm also saying, process driven. How can you call it process driven if maybe you don't have any interest in those head coaches? That's fine. But if you don't have any interest in talking to Quinn Snyder, if he becomes available, and he may become available, then how do you call that process driven?
Oh no, I've been told that yes, if there are additional coaches that become available in the coming weeks,
right,
and more like the coming days, then yes, they would consider. They are not locked into just the 7, but the 7 is the 7 out of coaches that are available to them. And again, like I with some of these, we got Mike Brown, we got Darvin Ham, we've got Charles Lee, we've got Will Hardy. Is there anyone else on this list? They're still in the playoffs, so getting them to Sacramento is not going to be easy. There will be off days, and there is potential for like a team to get through the first round, and then there'll be a couple of days for them to like come and see what's happening. But it would be like you fly in one morning, you fly out the next day.
Yeah, it happens. That's how it works. And hopefully
they might go to them as well.
And look, if you're interested, like again, let's say Will Hardy's your guy, you're probably not hiring him until he comes to visit with you. It's kind of like Vlade wanting to make sure that he works out a guy that before he drafts him. Okay.
Well, he wouldn't work out for Vlade, so Vlade doesn't want to draft him.
He gave everyone the blueprint on how not to go to Sacramento.
Yeah. That's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding.
Are there any concerns to you guys with finances, with how much the Kings are willing to put into their head coach making, with Luke Walton still getting paid, and just previous concerns on the Kings not
So are
paying?
you saying that you feel that they've been frugal?
I guess that's my question. You guys would know better than I, but I think that there is conversations about Monty McNair maybe not being paid what typical GMs are paid, or just the fact that Luke Walton is still on payroll. Like, is there concerns that Sacramento has lesser options because of what they're willing to pay, or am I overthinking this?
I would say it's not just Walton that's on the payroll for next year.
Right.
It's Alvin Gentry, Doug Christie, Jonah Hurskew, like name that assistant. They were all under contract because their contracts coincided with Luke's. And so, I mean, they're going to be out. I think Luke's contract was like between $6 and $6.5 million for next season because they backloaded the deal because they were paying Dave Yeager. That's just kind of the cost of doing business in Sacramento. You pay a guy 4 years to work for 2. It's just like it's science.
And to that point, like James, like that's the thing I've always given them credit for. Like, say what you will, they're not shy about paying people not to work. I think famously at one point, this ownership group paid 4 head coaches at a certain point. I don't think it ever eclipsed 4, but they had 4 coaches that they were paying.
They had Malone, Corbin, and Carl in one season, and then they had a new head coach.
Right.
And Yeager.
And when Yeager came in, I think that was the 4 they were still paying. That was the 4th that they would pay. So anyway, maybe one had dropped off, but point being, like, there's a lot of things, especially that we go back to when we were always talking about, criticisms or evaluations of this ownership group under Vivek Ranadive. And that's one thing I just objectively have a hard time when people will say that I mean, this guy spends money. He does.
He does, but he does skimp here and there when it comes to other things
Sure.
around the basketball world. So, I mean, again, I think assistants, you're probably going to have some sort of budget there that people, maybe doesn't work for some people.
Correct. And famously, there's a reason Brian Shaw wasn't on Luke Walton's bench, because they weren't going to pay him what he wanted to come here.
But they still paid Igor Gakoskov. I mean, that was a pretty heavy duty assistant. They still paid Alvin Gentry.
He had also just left a head coaching role. So you know what I mean? Like him leaving the Suns helped, and Gentry leaving New Orleans helped, and Gentry coming to join his buddy Luke Walton was a huge part of that.
Yeah. Brenden, why don't you give us a rundown on these guys? So Clifford, Brown, we've touched base on quite a bit, but what stands out, I guess, like in the numbers?
Yeah, let's do Mike Brown a little bit here first, right? Like 7 years as an assistant, 5 years as the Cleveland head coach from 05 to 06, starting that to 2009 to 2010, went to the finals 1 year. That's with LeBron James in his first time there. And then I guess 2 years with the Lakers. One of them he only is there for 5 games, so technically 2, I guess. And then he goes back to Cleveland for 1 year and is coaching Cleveland with Kyrie, Tristan Thompson, with no LeBron James. And since then has spent 6 years as a Golden State assistant. My question to you guys here, and he was successful, like in that time, he's dealing with good rosters, but to go to a finals is not something that should be overlooked. And you're talking 50 wins, 45, 66, 61. So certainly nothing to scoff at. My question to you guys is, how do you deal with, what is Mike Brown known for? Being able to work with these big personalities and star players certainly is a talent. I don't know that I identify anybody that's a big ego to manage or anything like that necessarily in Sacramento, even though that's part of any head coach's job, no matter the level of ego on any roster. But to you guys, what is Mike Brown known for being good at?
Oh, Sean forgot to unmute.
Sorry, Canadian.
Act like you've been there.
Yeah, it's been a while, guys. Yeah, to me, it's the OCD thing. I mean, I think it's a good thing. I mean, the guy knows so much. His attention to detail is incredible. And I feel like, especially in the age of young players in this young league, if you say Mike Brown, I think a lot of things that come to mind are Warriors and LeBron James, and also the Lakers. I mean, think about just where he's been. I think young players know him and they respect him, and he's had a level of success pretty much everywhere they go. I don't think a young player or even a veteran player really gives a damn about the whole Greg Popovich thing. I think sometimes that can scare players to a degree. If they think Greg Popovich, they think of, oh boy, because I mean, Will Hardy said it in that video, James, that uses, there's an attractiveness of the Spurs organization when they play that isn't all that attractive to basketball players and the common fan in general. Meaning, there was a question that came up where he says, yeah, I love there was another college coach talking to Will Hardy about, I love the Spurs system, but all my players hate it because they think it's boring. And then they watch the Warriors and they think it's, it's this pass. It's no, a lot of that exists the same way. You can have a fast-paced offense or a slow-it-down offense. Mike Brown's capable of doing all those things. So to me, it's the structure, the OCD, the attention to detail, and the fact that people know he's been around legit programs and superstar players.
Yeah, I think my biggest concern is with him, as much as probably more than anyone, is that can he do it without LeBron James? Can he do it without Kobe Bryant? Can he do it without Stephen Clay? And so that's going to be the biggest problem. Can you do it with a bad roster? Because when he's been given a bad roster, he was 33-49 with the Cavs, and that roster still was Kyrie, Tristan Thompson, Dion Waiters, Luol Deng. Like, they still had competent NBA players, and we're talking young versions of those guys, not 2021, 22, Tristan Thompson. We're talking about young Tristan Thompson. And he didn't find success. Yeah, he did make the playoffs 6 straight years, and he does have like a 616 win percentage as a head coach, which is remarkable. But, if I gave Steve Clifford the same opportunity that Mike Brown got, would I have a different outcome? Would Steve Clifford be the guy with the 616 record as opposed to Steve Clifford coaching some pretty rough rosters? And I'm not sure that I'm on board with Steve Clifford either, but I would say, again, to come back to one guy, Mike D'Antoni is a guy that has coached great players, but he's also created great players. And that's something that I think is like newsworthy. He's a guy that, like, he's coached so many different places, but he's also won in so many different places. His design has an ability to help players develop and get better, or put them in the right position to succeed. And then again, like, when it comes to like the Spurs mentality, like when we talk about this, I'm not looking for the Spurs offense or defense. I'm looking for the
culture.
the Spurs culture. And I think that that's different. That's where you're hoping that you got somebody who is figuring out things and, developing the right habits and all that stuff. Because again, like, if I'm looking at Darvin Ham and Charles Lee, like, you come to Sacramento, and I hope you know, but Giannis isn't like coming in your suitcase with you. He's not going to be there with you. And so now you've got to figure out how to manage without a true superstar, without one of the best players in the world. And of the group, I think, maybe it's Steve Clifford that had to deal with the least, right, out of everybody. And like, again, I like Mike Brown. I think he is probably, out of everybody, he's probably the safest pick. But Brenden, why don't you give us a rundown of Steve Clifford?
Yeah, Clifford stands out to me because, and part of the reason I ask with Brown is because I think with Clifford, that they're going to, he's known for his defense and getting the most out of a team on defense. And like, D'Antoni's known for his offense and being creative, thinking outside of the box. To me, like, I wasn't sure what Brown's identity was, kind of why I was asking.
It's a good question.
Clifford, 13 years as an assistant, back starting in 2000 and then up into 2012, 13 for 4 different teams. And he spends 5 years as Charlotte's head coach. What stands out to me is just getting the most out of these like subpar rosters. And the most isn't quite the top or anything like that. It's first round exits, but I think for rosters that maybe you didn't quite expect to reach that point. The year before Steve Clifford gets the job with Charlotte, what's then the Bobcats, they go 21-61, 28th in offensive rating, 30th in defensive. Second year of Kemba Walker, it's Gerald Henderson. And then the year after that, and this is also because they signed Al Jefferson and paid him a decent amount of money for a 3-year deal, but it goes from 21-61 to Steve Clifford's first year. They're going 43-39, and a 28th offensive rating only jumps to 24th, but 30th defensive rating goes to 5th. And with Al Jefferson being the big addition, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't remember Al Jefferson being somebody that's a difference maker on the defensive end exactly.
He's a big body, but yeah, he's more of a Zach Randolph offensive weapon.
Yeah, manages to be 5th in defensive rating on a team whose number 1 and 2 in minutes per game is Kemba Walker, Al Jefferson. Then you're talking Gerald Henderson, Josh McRoberts, Jeff Taylor, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist.
McBob.
And they get swept in the first round. So that's as far as Clifford's taking that team. But I think that given the roster that he's working with, a jump from 21-61 to 43-39 is impressive. Year after, Nick Batum's acquired, and they fall to 33-49, miss the postseason, but it's still a 9th defensive rating, offensive rating of only 28th, which is kind of going to be a little bit of a theme here. But in his time with Charlotte, it's subpar rosters. There's a year where they're working with a ridiculous amount of expiring contracts, and he's able to get everybody on the same page because the way that he pitches to everybody, the way that you get paid is not putting up numbers on a team that doesn't win, But even if you average 5 points less on a team that is winning basketball, you're going to go and get paid. And we saw this exact thing happen with Nick Batum, and where they go, 48-34, lose in 7 to Miami in the first round, but an offensive rating of 9th, defensive rating of 8th. Again, a really underwhelming roster. But to take a Miami team to 7 games in the first round is impressive. Like Kemba Walker, Nicholas Batum, Courtney Lee, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, Marvin Williams, Jeremy Lin, Cody Zeller. It's certainly not players that are not contributors, but I don't think that's a roster you look at and expect to be top 10 in offense and defense. Year after, doesn't end up making the postseason, 36-46, and then he's fired when Mitch Kupchak is brought in to be GM, and Kupchak's allowed to make his own decisions from there. And also that season, I think that Clifford took a little bit of time off for different health issues as well. But then is hired to be Orlando's head coach, and the year before before Clifford goes to Orlando, Frank Vogel is the head coach in 2017-18, and that team wins 25 games. They go 25-57 with the rookie Jonathan Isaac. And then in 2018-19, when the big addition really to that team is just DJ Augustine, if you want to call that a big addition, they jump from 25-57 the year before with Vogel to the first year with Steve Clifford. They're 42-40 and go from 18th defensive rating to 8th. And to me, being 8th in defensive rating when your starting 5 is DJ Augustine, Evan Fournier, and then the defensive difference makers being Aaron Gordon and Jonathan Isaac, but Vucevic as your 5, I think it's pretty impressive. And like this is where I look a little bit at Steve Clifford was able to make DJ Augustine, Evan Fournier, and Nikola Vucevic, that starting 5, be a top 10 defense. And to me, and again, that is a lot to do with having versatile wings who are difference makers on that end to make up for it in Aaron Gordon, Jonathan Isaac, 2 really, really good defensive wings. But I think it says a lot that he's able to make Vucevic and Augustine and Fournier a top 10 defense, and I can see how that would relate to De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis and getting the most out of those guys on the defensive end. So to me, like the pitch for Steve Clifford is figuring out how to get the most out of a team on the defensive end and just optimizing a roster. We haven't seen him deal with an extremely talented roster and what he's able to do with a lot of talent and getting out of the first round even. But I do think there's an argument to just getting the most out of what he's dealing with. And then the reason he's moved on from in Orlando is just simply being on different pages. He's tired of losing, and they're looking to rebuild a little bit there. So from what I could tell, no ill will or bad blood in that departure. So that's kind of why I see the pitch for Clifford is he's able to make solid defenses out of teams that really shouldn't be good on the defensive end and get the most out of a team. But it's hard to value that when he hasn't worked with elite talent. Where are you guys at when looking at Clifford's career?
Well, to me, I think he's a guy who is all about the structure, the detail. You mentioned it, Brenden. I think that was a really good rundown too, because his defense improvement, the continuity that he's had with his teams, which have primarily been bad, and you look at progress that he tries to make. The only thing that really concerns me the most is his health. And to me, I think, I just wouldn't want to see him take over another bad team and try to make them better. And I don't think that bodes well, but I do feel like he'd be the guy that I'd really love on the staff. I think he'd be a great assistant and associate. That number one, I think he'd really be a great support tool for a first-time head coach. And that's probably where I would be at. I wouldn't run to try to make him my head coach. I'd have too many concerns. I think he'd be better suited taking over a team that's already a playoff team and needs to get better, needs to make that next step. I think that would be beneficial for him as well. I think going from the trying to take a perennial terrible team and try to make them better, even though he's done that, I just don't think bodes well for him.
Yeah, I think the allure with him is the defensive improvement, and you can see where the Kings could, clearly improve defensively because you really can't get much worse. But again, he's 60. On the defensive end, so he's an assistant with the Knicks, the Rockets, the Magic, and then the Lakers. The Lakers season is crazy because in that Lakers season, he's there while Mike Brown is there for 5 games and gets fired. Later that season, Mike D'Antoni takes over for, becomes a head coach. And also hiding on that staff is Darvin Ham. So in that one season, D'Antoni, Darvin Ham, Mike Brown, and Steve Clifford are all on the same staff at one time or another. But getting back to the Knicks, the Rockets, the Magic, those are all Van Gundy, like one Van Gundy or another. So he has learned his principles from the Van Gundys without any question. His defensive acumen, his defensive understanding is very Van Gundy driven. He also was with Patrick Ewing for a long time, right? Patrick Ewing was his assistant for quite a while, and again, you're gonna talk about Georgetown. You're gonna talk about the principles of Van Gundy's and Riley's and stuff like that when it comes to Pat Ewing. Yeah, I think the biggest thing I'd point to as well is that while he did have a couple of good years in Charlotte, his best year was 48 wins. His final 3 years really are 42, 33, and 21 wins. It's not a great roster, so I'm not going to harp on him. But at the same time, we saw pretty solid regression from a team. They went from a team that had a ton of talent that looked like it was oddly put together and could not fit together, and then progressively got worse and worse until they blew it up. And so he's there as they blow it up, but at the same time, I don't think he did. I mean, he's 5-16 in the playoffs, and I mean he's perfectly fine as far as a middle of the road. Again, I hate using this team, but retread coach. But I don't think that that's what you're looking for here. You're either looking for something that changes everything, or you're looking for someone who can build something from the ground up. I also think if there's some way that you could get Darvin Ham as your head coach, or Charles Lee, or Will Hardy, and you could have Steve Clifford and Mike D'Antoni on your staff, then all of a sudden it's hey, all right. I mean, because both of these guys might be looking for assistant jobs if they can't get head coaching jobs just to get back in, because there are all these other assistants there. If the Kings don't hire one of the 3 young guys, somebody is going to in the next 2 years. They're on a short list of up and coming young coaches that are going to get head coaching jobs. You can throw Vanderpool, you can throw a couple other young coaches in that. Maybe Sam Cassell could be a first time head coach over the next couple of years. But that looks really bleak for a guy like Steve Clifford or a guy like Mike D'Antoni, because not only are you dealing with these younger guys who are coming up, but you still have a Frank Vogel that's out there. You still have a Dave Yeager that's out there who might get back into it, into a head coaching job. You still have Borrego. You still have, where does Quinn Snyder go, or if Doc Rivers leaves. That's pretty daunting if you're Steve Clifford trying to get back into the head coaching job field. And so I think finding a good spot where you could maybe take a smaller role might help out with A, health, but B, also with, sort of your career path going forward. It would be good to see a coach like that with all of that knowledge, all of that Van Gundy knowledge, and that experience of helping young players get better, but just in a different role.
Yeah, I think definitely makes sense and would be an ideal assistant. Even just hearing him talk about some of the defensive principles of, prioritizing protecting the rim and not letting opponents get to the free throw line, something that we've seen the Kings be horrible at. It's even when you have bad perimeter containment, it's just don't let them blow by you on the first dribble. And, that protecting the rim and not giving up free throws takes priority over giving up 3-point shots. And the importance of communication. Just so many... The Kings are horrible defensively, and as a guy that really enjoys watching defense, I think it was easy for me to kind of talk myself into it a little bit, but, doesn't want to be in a situation where there's a little bit of a rebuild. if things went south in Sacramento, I could see how it could be quickly frustrating for Steve Clifford compared to one of these younger coaches where, all right, well, I'm still going to stick around and see this thing through until it ends up turning around. Yeah, so I'm with you guys. I see why Clifford would make an ideal assistant. And then when you look at D'Antoni, 16 years as a head coach, 4 as an assistant, I think most recently as a consultant with the Pelicans right now. In 7 of those 16 years is 50-plus wins. He's coach of the year twice in 04-05 with the Phoenix Suns, 16-17 with the Houston Rockets. Most known for like just being creative on the offensive end, right, and willing to think outside of the box. And he's even talked about how he wishes he maybe went a little bit further into that with the 5 seconds or less, or 7 seconds or less Phoenix Suns. I know we've also talked about his maybe hesitance to fully buy into a big man. Like we saw Clint Capella moved on from with the Houston Rockets. It's hard to differentiate how much of that is D'Antoni, how much of it is Daryl Morey with Morey ball. Maybe a combination of both. The only big man that stands out to me in his time is Amari Stoudemire, both with the Knicks and the Phoenix Suns. Am I crazy for, and I guess Paul Gasol as well with the Lakers, am I crazy for like looking at D'Antoni and it's like he's easily got the best resume of everybody here?
Nah. I mean,
Well, and I think to build a good resume, you got to be in the league forever.
Right.
Which is why
He
we're
has
talking about
resume.
a guy who turned 71 on May 8th. So, yes, his resume is strong, but it's a long resume. Go ahead, Sean.
Well, and I think also Coach of the Year is not like MVP in the league. Like Coach of the Year award is such a fickle award that most people, I mean, I think coaches love it. I don't think many people in the media look at it and even among the league and go, "Oh, good for you," because sometimes the best coach doesn't always get the job. It's so circumstantial. So I don't know that does anything, especially. But I will say this: of all those coaches that the Kings are talking to, yeah, you could make that argument that he's the most decorated. Maybe I would just say he would offer, in my opinion, instant entertainment. Like at least this team would be fun to watch. So that's tremendous. I think he's probably better suited as an assistant at this point of his life. But I love Mike D'Antoni. He'd make my job incredibly, incredibly easy. I can talk to him for days, and he's a great storyteller. He's a great communicator, a great human being, and I'd love that. But to me, I think fans would be excited because you've got a Ferrari in De'Aaron Fox, and he doesn't like to keep his foot on the pedal for some reason a lot of the times. And I think Mike D'Antoni would make sure that happens.
Yeah, I like D'Antoni as well, like a ton. If there's one guy on this list that has that je ne sais quoi, like it's just something different, right? It's that something special. It's him. He's been the guy who has stepped in and like he burns himself out and goes through one job after another. But I'll go back to like the 2017-2018 Houston Rockets. They were first in offensive rating, which we all expect. They were 6th in defensive rating. Like that team was incredible, and it was done with superstars at the top, but then a bunch of like middle of the road guys, right? So like I really do appreciate just the idea of Mike D'Antoni, what he's brought to the league, the way he's changed things, the brilliance of his coaching and all that. I just worry that again he's a guy that you can plan on maybe 3 years, but anything after that, then you're getting into like some territory that you're of unknowns, and I would look at something that's more long term. Again, give him if he wants to be an assistant offensive coordinator. Oh yeah, that's fine with me. But like I think that there's one of these guys that probably could use him as a high end assistant next to him, and I would Alvin Gentry. I feel the same way about.
An indefinable, elusive quality, especially a pleasing one. Je ne sais quoi. Just helping some people out there.
Helping me out,
Yeah.
specifically.
French. Je ne sais quoi.
And I will say, Mike Brown, Coach of the Year 08-09, but to Sean's point, like Dwayne Casey won it in 17-18, was fired the same year.
George Karl.
Does Sam Mitchell have 2?
Oh, that's possible. George Karl won it and then got fired.
Yeah.
Tom
Thibodeau won it last year, by the way. How'd that go this year?
Again, it's that award that like who won it this year? It's Monty Williams, right?
Yeah.
It's like, and again, all due respect to Monty Williams, that team went to the finals last year, and I think people are rewarding him for going to the finals last year because no one had him going to the finals last year.
Yeah.
But like Taylor Jenkins, anybody?
Right.
I mean,
Michael Malone having two max players out. Like, I mean, again, there's arguments to be made, but just throwing it out there.
They went like 19-2 with John Morant out.
Morant. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, and that's where I talk about, like, look, the Kings need a culture setter. They need someone that builds that. I mean, sure, you need talent.
Yeah, you got talent. Talent's still going to win out.
No, talent is going to win out, but like, you can't tell me that some of the players on that roster are just so much more talented than everyone else's players. And we're seeing players develop there where they're not developing in places like Sacramento. So seeing, Desmond Bane like take off, like, okay, that is on the culture and the coaching staff and what they're doing right. And that's where I'm like, look, get this one right. Like, and get something that you're building, because you aren't just falling behind in talent. You're falling behind in the culture that these other teams that you're trying to compete with, they jumped ahead of you. They've got guys in place and they're building around those guys. They have, a Willie Green goes 1-13 to start the season. Everyone in the league's like, oh, I don't think it's going to work out. He's probably a 1-year head coach, which would be after a 1-year Stan Van Gundy head coach. And then boom, they hit it right and he takes off. You look at Ime Udoka, again, the first half of the season, it's like, oh, this is a mess. It's not a mess anymore. And we're seeing a guy that's standing right next to Ime Udoka that's up for this job, that has seen the bad times and the good times, who has, worked with a Tim Duncan, but also a DeJounte Murray. Like, you're seeing there's some good candidates on this list. I don't hate this list. I mean, are there some other guys I would, if Quinn Snyder becomes available, is he my number one, like, instantly? Oh, yeah. I've said that forever. But, I'm okay with some of these, especially the younger guys. And I just think that right now in the league, there is an equal chance of you finding a young guy that works out as you bringing in a retread and having that work out. The advantage to a young guy, an inexperienced guy, is that you're just getting an opportunity to have it work out for much longer. And that's why I kind of focus on those guys. That's why they're my top two, or two of the inexperienced guys.
Yeah.
You said it, man. I can't really argue with that. But the big but. I don't know. Again, first timers though, again, some people are better off assistants, and I feel like if you're a first-time head coach, you better pick the right situation. And that's where I feel where the Kings, look, I know it's still one of 30 jobs. So, and especially if you're a never has been a head coach, you hope to maybe, but again, if you're somebody like some of these high touted assistants that should be able to have maybe their pick, or, and a guy like Will Hardy, like someone like even James Borrego is coming off his first head coaching stint, I think they probably look at where the tree that they came from, and they know that Pop is not going to be around much longer. And they might look at that system and knowing that they probably make the most sense going back, running his system and replacing him if whoever is the heir apparent to take over. Meaning that, again, if you're the Kings, there's a sell job, I feel like. I think instantly Domantas Sabonis makes your franchise more attractive to any coach. And I think that's why they'll have the ability to snag somebody that they want. But again, if I'm a first-time head coach and I'm thought of rather highly in this league, meaning that, oh, this guy's going to be a head coach, do I want it to be the Kings? Do I want to tarnish everything to be the Kings, or do I want to maybe stay on this Bucks team a little longer, probably win another championship, possibly win another championship, and take my time with it. Take my time to go somewhere I want to be, not in some place that I feel like I need to take the job because it might not come around again. And that to me is why, if you're the Kings, I don't know that unless you're getting that bright star that you feel is going to be, again, I think it's been pretty famously circulated by now, but my report, like we all know Chris Finch was Monty's guy. That's who he had, and that would have been akin to Luke Walton being Vlade Divac's guy. And I always cringe when people say, "Oh, they didn't interview enough people before they hired Luke Walton." It's like, no, that was his guy. They interviewed the world. I think James got an interview before they hired Dave Yeager. Okay, so
12 guys, most of them 3 and 4 times.
Yeah, 12 guys in person, mind you.
And then Dave Yeager became available on a Friday, flew in on a Saturday, and was signed to a contract on Sunday morning.
Correct. And
after Vlade had done all that work, and I will tell you, still to this day, I don't care who says differently, that was not Vlade's hire.
No, it wasn't. It was not Vlade's hire. But again, that was process driven.
Comprehensive and process driven.
That did not happen overnight. And they knew the guy that they wanted the entire time. Vlade knew who he wanted the entire time. And when the guy came available, he got him. So again, Chris Finch isn't available. He's also coaching in the playoffs right now.
And even the way that happened.
He just signed an extension, didn't he?
He was an assistant on someone else's staff like early in the day.
Right? No, excuse me. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, James.
Yeah, I mean, they let go of Saunders and had him in the building and hired mid-season on the same day. Like the most stunning turnaround I've ever seen, where you went out and got someone on someone else's staff and made it happen in one day. I don't even know how that happened. Like that took some next level negotiations with another team. But yeah, I mean, that's these young coaches that are having such success. Again, Nick Nurse was the guy who kind of started this latest trend. But Taylor Jenkins and Finch and Willie Green and Emi Udoka, for all of those guys, there's still a Chauncey Billups. There's still I can't remember how to say his name in OKC. There's still Mosley and Orlando.
Wes Unseld.
Wes Unseld.
Yeah.
What's that?
Wes Unseld in Washington is still up for question. Like, I mean, if you want to talk about how Ryan Saunders played out in Minnesota, which maybe there were other motivations to him getting the job. But, yeah, I mean, Jim Boylan was a first-time guy. I know he's older, but that was his first head coaching opportunity. That didn't work out in Chicago.
How about J.B. Bickerstaff? That's a pretty good one.
Yeah, see, that has worked out, although he had been an interim a couple of times.
Right, he'd been in a lot of
right?
places. Dagnall. I always say Dagnall. I don't know how to say it.
It's Dagnall, I think. Mark Dagnall from OKC. Like, some of these jobs are just bad jobs, and I think some of these first-year coaches that aren't succeeding, you knew they weren't going to succeed because it's a bad job. I kind of feel like, especially if you look at most of those teams, the Orlando job, the OKC job, the Portland job, which we knew they were going to tear down, even the Wizards job, like the Kings job compared to those, really, it's equal to or better than. And so,
from a roster standpoint.
Yeah, because you at least have 2 guys you can build around. And then, like, if I'm looking at...
It's more than roster, though.
Well, of course. Well, and if I'm looking at the jobs that are available right now, the Utah job could be a disaster because there's a good chance they're tearing down. If they blow this thing up, it's not just going to be the coaching staff leaving. It's going to be a total teardown with players, like, demanding trades and all that stuff. The job and the Lakers job is a hot mess because you're stuck with Russ at $48 million next year. The one job that's really good that I would jump all over if I'm one of these young guys is that Charlotte job where they have an up-and-coming team that's like, okay.
You would jump to Charlotte? Well, you're looking strictly roster, though.
I mean,
again, how many coaches are going to want to say that they coached LeBron James?
Right.
But for 1 year?
Who cares? You're a Lakers.
Maybe 2?
It's the Lakers.
Oh, and you're going to get paid.
You're in LA.
You're going to get paid.
Yeah.
Although there's rumors that Quinn Snyder was pissed about the way they handled.
I think he'd jump over it if they He could be pissed all
Yeah.
he wants. And it's the, you know,
But
money
if-
has a funny way of making people feel a lot different.
No, it does. Yeah.
And
I
Utah
mean,
resetting is still probably keeping one of Donovan Mitchell or Rudy Gobert, and then whatever you get back for one of the other ones. Like, I think there's definitely a way that you can look at Sacramento as like as appealing as some of these others, or on the top end of what's available. But I think there's also people that could look at it as one of the lower options.
And we haven't even mentioned Doc Rivers. Like, I think he's probably going to get fired.
yeah. Oh, look at that. And who's going to take that job?
And you know what? I
That's
think
again,
what he said.
Quinn
I think
Snyder
what he
take
said
that
the
job.
other day. And again, I don't know why you would do this as the head coach of Philadelphia in a scrum. But why are you making excuses for your 3-1 collapses? What are you doing? Even if you truly feel that way, and obviously he does, like, don't say it there. If you're playing a game of cards or having a beer with someone, you can talk about it then. But you're going to do that in Philadelphia, to the media in Philadelphia, and try to make excuses. That's at the worst possible time to do that. What are you doing? But I'd
Yes.
still, you know what? I like Doc Rivers. I'd probably see Doc Rivers. You can call him a retread. I think he comes in here and makes his team better.
Oh, heck yeah. I mean, I would take Doc Rivers, but I
I'd
don't
love
think
to
Doc
be
Rivers.
3-1 in a series.
Right?
Yeah. I don't know what a series is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Series is something I watch on Netflix and
Oh,
Prime.
you mean those 2 games when you play a team back to back like that? Oh, okay.
Yeah. The Houston Rockets. It's always the Houston Rockets. You play them twice. And then that's not really a series, is it? Yeah. All right. Look, this has been fun. And, it's going to take us a little while to build chemistry and everything else with the three of us doing stuff on here. But so far, so good, man. Good conversation, guys.
Felt like we kicked the can around.
Yeah, but we needed to, right? Yeah. Like this is kind of where we are. We're in a weird coaching search. We dug deep into the young
And to all of these
coaching-
guys.
See, there you go. Yes, into the coaching search on Tuesday, and like I think this is a good continuation because, like again, we have some really good knowledge on these guys. There's such a track record to deal with. We're going to be back later on tonight for the happy hour. So if you're watching this right now, jump on board with the Kings Beat premium subscription, and you'll get an invite to the happy hour, which is a blast because we do this, but then we drink and we may tell a few more stories that we shouldn't tell. And so that's fun. Let's start this. Brenden, do you have any final thoughts?
I'm still figuring out the best place to somehow work Ham into my last name. But that's really all I got here.
Brendham Nunes.
Yeah, like Ham. Yeah, I don't know. There's a couple different options. Not really, but I'm figuring it out and could use recommendations.
All right. Sean, because they want to do like segments with using the ham and both of our last names.
What do you mean?
Going ham, like a
Oh.
segment. Because we have Tuesday overreactions, your favorite. Holy shnikes. We haven't done the business of basketball.
We didn't.
And here it is, business of basketball. Because Deuce and Mo just did this to me just a little while ago.
Okay.
Who would you choose as the new head coach of the Sacramento Kings of the 7? And we'll top it off with who do you think they will choose? Sean, you
Okay.
start.
So we kind of did that, right? So, all right, I'll go who I would pick of the 7. I told you I was undecided, but if I had a gun to my head, I think I'm going to pick Mike Brown. I think I would give Mike Brown the job. I don't even believe I'm saying that, but I do. Who gets the job? If I'm to pick of these 7, I think Charles Lee gets the job.
Interesting. Okay. Brenden, what do you got?
My pick, I'm going to go with Darvin Ham. Just because I'm torn between Ham and Hardy, and I picked Hardy at the beginning of the episode, so I'm going with Darvin Ham right now.
I see you,
And
Mark Jackson.
I would pick Darvin Ham. My guess, I'm going to say Steve Clifford. I think Steve Clifford can make a good pitch about how he can optimize the roster that Sacramento's dealing with right now.
Okay. I'm going to go. I believe I would choose Will Hardy. And it's because of his ties to the Spurs and the way he came up through the system and just the way that he orchestrates a conversation. And I think the way he orchestrates a conversation, like, I really like how he can bring a group in and, like, I think he can command a room. Who I think gets the job, I would say if he would take it, it would probably be Mike Brown, but I'm going to guess he won't take it and will wait for a better job because I think he's on a short list of better job candidates that are out there. And so
That's such a shitty thing to say. It's like here's the Kings, but then there's the Kings candidates, and then there's the better job candidates. That sucks.
well, yeah, but I mean, it's where you're at right now, right? Because
Right,
there is
right.
the Lakers and Charlotte job. There's potential for the Philly job, which I think he would be good there. And then there's a potential for the Utah job, which I think he'd be good there, unless they tear it down. And there's also guys like Borrego that are out there that, again, I think, like, if I were to predict some of that stuff, I would say Borrego goes back to the Spurs and becomes the heir apparent. But that's just my own personal thoughts. Who do I think? Man, I'm gonna say Darvin Ham gets the job, but maybe I'm wrong. And then if he does, then I have to bring him a fedora, so we can be fedora hams together.
If he does, I need to watch him shatter another backboard. That was incredible.
He
That
was
was
so
so
much fun to
amazing.
watch.
Yeah.
Like Brenden didn't know he ever played basketball, but yeah.
No clue.
This'll
Brennan
be
wasn't
fun.
born when Darvin Ham was breaking backboards. Yeah.
James, my final thoughts, by the way, I just have to say it's actually good to talk Kings basketball again because, I mean, I kind of do it a lot anyway, obviously, but lately it's been a lot of Warriors for the past couple weeks and, yeah, even last night. And while that's been fun, it's just, there's a lot still going on with the Kings that when you go 2 weeks without really having 3 weeks without even having really Kings content or coverage, you kind of feel like, oh man, it's missing. Like we have to do this. So I'm glad we're doing this again. And I'm glad you and I aren't fighting anymore. And
We were never fighting.
never
Just so everyone
fighting.
knows. We were never fighting. Okay, Brennan, you had final thoughts?
I think it just says something that Sean is enjoying talking about the Kings, that like missed talking about the Sacramento Kings. I think we're
did.
all quietly masochists here. I don't know.
I
Says
agree.
something. I guess real quick, I think one of you vaguely mentioned it. You think this is a fairly quick process? We don't have to dive too far into it, but how long do you think this takes?
I was told they hope for it to be 2, maybe 3 weeks, but like a relatively quick turnaround. Like between the first and second week of May, they expect to have someone in place.
Yeah, that's consistent with what I've heard as well. And but it doesn't have to be. That's what I would just keep saying is it as I always like to say, the NBA changes by the day, so it doesn't have to be.
Very
I
true.
can say that's what I've heard as well. So perfect.
All right. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to finish up here. Number one, just absolutely love having Sean Cunningham back. It was good to have him back in the fold. Super, super excited for Sean and his new adventure. He's working with some really, really cool up and young coming talent here in Sacramento, and Chris and Lindsay. And I think he's going to be the glue that helps them build something special at Fox and really takes off. So, it's going to be great to see it, especially, you guys are all like fresh and under contract just now, so you can grow together. Which, you guys used to have the news team assemble with you and Yamamoto and Brian May
Yeah.
and Nick Monticelli, and like it was, you guys had a good group. I hope that you're able to sort of build that thing the right way at Fox.
Appreciate that. Yeah, I think it will be. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, a lot of work ahead of you, but I think it's a good journey and it's a good career move for you, and it allows you to come back and work at on the Kings Beat podcast, which is the absolute best. So we're gonna figure all this out. We're gonna keep plugging away all summer long. We're gonna have episodes every Tuesdays and Thursdays. We're gonna get through the coaching search here, which we kind of spun our tires with this week. But then we're going to go to draft and all that stuff. It's we're going to keep plugging away. So make sure you're staying with us. Again, if you're free this evening, jump on board with the Kings Beat Premium membership, and it will get you an invite to the happy hour. The happy hour is an absolute hoot. We have a good time.
Tipsy time.
We talk a lot of craziness, and we'll probably take this conversation to a whole nother level. But also you get to interact and you get to ask questions and all that stuff. So it's a lot of fun. Plus, I think I'm probably going to give away a couple of T-shirts, maybe a sweatshirt, maybe a hat for a premium. Yeah,
James going Oprah here.
Yeah, I mean, you get a shirt and you get a shirt. Exactly. So again, it's been great having this, getting the band back together and with new band members and old band members coming back. So it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks and months as we get through the season. So for Fox 40's Sean Cunningham and Brenden Nunes from the Kings Pulse podcast and the Kings Herald, I am James Ham, your Kings insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.